We are delighted to welcome you all to the book release ceremony of Governing Urban India Policy and Practice by Dr. A. Ravindra. This book is a profound exploration of the challenges and opportunities in urban governance and policy in India. Governing Urban India Policy and Practice is the culmination of Dr. Ravindra's experiences and reflections over several decades in public service and urban governance. It was indeed a timely decision to publish this book during the elections, as it allows us to look at the complex terrain of governance and think about what it takes to provide effective governance in a country like India. Dr. Ravindra has written about several instances from his experiences that span from the 1960s to the present, especially from Karnataka, and articulates the dissonances between governance, policy, and practice in this book. Dr. A. Ravindra served as an Indian Administrative Service Officer and retired as the Chief Secretary to the Government of Karnataka. He was an advisor to the Chief Minister of the state on urban affairs. He currently heads the Center for Sustainable Development, where his primary focus is on designing and developing methods and practices that enable sustainable development. As a civil servant, in various capacities, he has steered reforms in property tax, infrastructure development efforts, and citizen partnerships in urban governance. Dr. Ravindra holds a doctorate in urban studies and has several publications to his credit. Joining Dr. Ravindra on the dais today are Dr. Vijay Kelkar and Aromar Revi. Dr. Kelkar is one of India's preeminent economists and is a member of the board of Indian Institute for Human Settlements. He was the chairman of the 13th Finance Commission of India and Finance Secretary of the Government of India. Known as the architect of the Goods and Services Tax (GST), Dr. Kelkar was advisor to the Minister of Finance and was executive director on the board of International Monetary Fund. Dr. Kelkar has held various notable positions in government, public, and private sectors and was awarded the prestigious Padma Vibhushan in January 2011. Aromar Revi is the founding director of the Indian Institute for Human Settlements. Over 15 years, he has built IIHS into one of the world's leading education, research, training, advisory, and implementation support institutions located in Global South, focusing on the multi-sectoral and multi-dimensional challenges and opportunities of sustainable urbanization. He's a global practice and thought leader, educator, and institution builder with close to 40 years of local to global interdisciplinary experience in sustainable development, public policy and governance, human settlements, and global environmental and technological change. We are honored to have Dr. Kelkar with us today, one of the pivotal figures in shaping our nation's economic policies. I would like to invite Dr. Kelkar to unveil the book, Governing Urban India, Policy and Practice. Aro to receive the first copy of the book from Dr. Kelkar.
Actually, we're very glad to have this because my colleagues have been working with Dr. Ravindra over many, many months. Thank you, sir. To try and put this together in spite of all the challenges and the illnesses in between. So we're very glad to see this actually coming into fruition. So thank you very much, and over to Vijay. Thank you, sir. It's a big pleasure. Our students are going to use this, and so is the library. Would you like to say something, or Vijay will?
No, Vijay say something. Let us show this.
Yeah. He's got his own copy and he's made his own notes.
On three now.
Yeah, sorry.
On three.
Thank you.
I invite Dr. Kelkar to speak a few words about the book.
Dr. Ravindra, my colleague Aromar Revi, and there are so many distinguished colleagues here. I don't want to name each one of them. So many distinguished colleagues are here, which I don't want to name every one of them, except our venerable senior colleague, Mr. Ramnathan. Was very pleased to see him. I must congratulate you on this book. It's a beautiful book, masterly book on what he calls epistemology of urbanization. And also this word I had sought after many years, but other word I didn't learn also after releasing the book. He also calls it historiography of urbanization, which is a even sort of, I think, more important description of this one. Great book. And he has one of the most enjoyable chapter, if I may say so, I found the history of historical. When he traces the oldest city in India, starting with Mohenjo-daro, and then comes to the latest one, including Banaras. And Banaras, I'm told, is the only living city in the world which has been existing since its inception. So it's a great book, and I want to thank you for giving it to me. I learned a lot. I got a couple of points I want to make before you. One interesting chapter here is in very worrisome, what he calls as discontent in urbanization. And it's one of the most worrisome chapter, and especially of younger generation will find it quite useful to understand what's happening and what we should do about it. One issue which this book has not, although last chapter is on governance, has at last looked at it, and maybe you had it in mind but didn't have, is, I'm an economist, so we only understand in terms of demand and supply. That's only how we think about it. So how do we increase demand for better governance in the cities? You have talked about supply side, how to do it. But how do you increase better? Why don't cities don't ask for better governance? What ticks the demand? That would be the important issue. I don't have answers, but it just occurred to me to understand the political economy. We have to see the both demand side and supply side. For instance, a very interesting story about 73rd and 74th Amendment he gives, which talks about part of a glimpse in demand side, supply side, but is also repetition of what happened 100 years ago, which he points out, Lord Ripon report, which also talked about this giving, improving the governance. So here's some insights, very important insights, but I still think we have to think more about how to improve, and I have some thoughts about it, but I think it's important how to increase demand for better. To my mind, the way of increasing demand for better governance is by each one of the citizens become stakeholders in better governance. I'll tell you what I have in mind. Today, and most of the funds come from central government, state governments, and people love free goods. They think that it's free. But actually they're paying for it, which is not really understood by them. So my suggestion is that government now, we have a wonderful, somebody mentioned about GST. Do you remember the great song of Johnny Walker, Lakh Lukho Ke Ek Dawa Hai? And of course you're talking about Champi. To my mind, GST is Lakh Lukho Ke Ek Dawa Hai. If you want to increase demand for better governance, share GST with the third tier. That's the only way each one of us becomes stakeholders for better supply of services. Today, then I see that my money is going for this as a consumer, I demand better governance. So there will be no free riders. Each one of us becomes a political actor in terms of increasing for. So that's one suggestion I have for consideration. Whether that will help or not, I don't know, but I personally believe it greatly help. And only last other point I want to make, and then I will hand over, is one interesting idea of improving the governance of cities. Because in last chapter, I believe that my very simple rule, it will take, we can do it over time, by insisting the corporation must publish, have accounting on accrual basis and not on cash basis, itself will give a far greater sense of accountability. Today, everything is hidden because accounting is not accrual basis. Why does SEBI insist that all listed entities must have accrual accounting? Because there's much more accountability is there. So accounting, start with basic accounts, change the accounting system for third tier, on move from cash accounting to accrual accounting. That itself will go a long way, in my view, of improving also demand, because it will become more transparent. You will find people that they just want insist on better governance and more truthful governance. So, but there are many other ideas. I'm sure Aro would have many. But I would urge everyone to buy this book. This is an excellent book. And there's a lot of data in it. What I found useful is there's a lot of data in it. It's taken a lot of trouble of getting data and make it comparable. So there's a lot of data, there's a lot of information. I would urge everyone to buy this book. I don't know whether publishers bought the books here or not, but otherwise you do buy this book. And once again, I want to congratulate you and giving me a opportunity to read this, and I learned a lot. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Vijay. Would you like to respond to him, sir, or should we sort of jump in? No,
I'll say a word.
It's on. It's already on.
First of all, let me thank Dr. Kelkar. Was very, very kind enough to agree to write the foreword for my book. I mean, it is not easy. I was wondering when I handed over the manuscript to him, whether he would go through the entire manuscript and write. But I must say, more than anyone, he has gone through it very scrupulously and has written an excellent foreword, which in a way summarizes many of the things the book contains, and given his own suggestions. I mean, especially that what he was referring to improve the finances of the municipal local bodies. Now we have been talking about it. GST, a part of GST, both the state and the center should share about 6%. He has recommended a flat rate of 12%, which is the right thing to do. I mean, that is one. And the state and the center, they should give at least 1/10 of their proceeds, their revenue. So that itself will give more than 2 lakh crores it will generate. And every year there may be an increase of about 10%. That will greatly augment the resources of the local bodies. I think this is an excellent suggestion, and I hope you will also give some thrust to it and take it across Government of India and the state government. Some of these suggestions should come forward. So thank you, sir, for taking the trouble of writing the foreword and being here for the release of the book. My thanks to Dr. Aromar Revi, actually the director of IIHS. He has been actually instrumental in a great way for this book to come out. When I had just completed the draft and I was mulling over it, then he said, no, you don't worry, you come. We will release, we will try to arrange for the release and all that. I mean, I also had the assistance of his researchers and all that while, finalizing the book. So, thank you, Ravi, and it's certainly great to be with you. And now I think we can have a kind
I'll
of
jump
conversation.
straight into a few questions to pick up from what Vijay said just now. And the wonderful thing about the book, apart from its expanse, both in terms of history and sort of levels of engagement with a whole range of urban questions, I think because it's written by I would say, a scholar administrator, probably now more a scholar than an administrator. It's been many years. You're being able to look at it from the inside out, because most scholars look at it from the outside in. But having looked at it from the inside out, and also having tried for many years to sort of operationalize some critical innovations. Most important being I would say, the implementation in both spirit and letter of the 74th Constitutional Amendment. You know, as K.C. Shivaramakrishnan, who we both know quite well, said at the end of it, you know, there were some critical gaps in that frame that needed to be addressed. So, you know, we tried to do that. Just to speak to what Vijay said just now, there are two critical things. One, of course, is the constitutional amendment itself and the need to amend it. And we had hoped in the 75th year, given the kind of situation that we had in the, you know, the supermajority in Parliament, that the Prime Minister would have been really quite emboldened and gone ahead and done that. So the first question is, how does one look at that as one goes forward? And then, if you do have the amendment, it doesn't work unless you have fiscal federalism working. The intergovernmental system is very important. And then you can have the intergovernmental system, you can have the mandate, but if you don't have the institutional capacity, which is what you worked on, then in some senses it doesn't work. So, you know, your reflections, because I think we got very close, and you were instrumental in doing that in Bengaluru, to actually making this the first metropolitan city in the country that would operationalize the 74th Amendment in its spirit, not in, you know, only in the law. So some reflections on that would be very, very nice.
Thank you. I think, as you said, yes, I mean, working from the inside, you know, even Dr. Kelkar has written in his foreword about the need for more decentralization, there's no doubt. And he has echoed my own thoughts when he said there is need for a successor to 74th Amendment. That means I have said it should be revisited and maybe replaced. It means a successor act. So there are many loopholes there. You know, we try to do it. You see, the 74th Amendment, when it was made, for the sake of compliance with the constitutional, the state governments, including Karnataka, they made certain amendments. That means, you know, it's okay. But then in practice, for instance, the 74th Amendment gives you a list of 18 functions under the 12th schedule. Now, not all of them are with the local bodies. I mean, that is still today. In Karnataka, in Bangalore itself, see, the very essential function of water supply, for us, which is supposed to be with the local bodies, we have a separate water supply board. So the role of parastatals is another issue. I think Lakshmi is here, she was Commissioner of BDA, so another parastatal. So BDA, BWSSB, or Transport Corporation, electricity and all. So there are two issues here. One is decentralization essentially implies political. It is not delegation. Delegation may be done increasing the powers of the commissioner, sanction here, something. Political decentralization has not taken place. That's what I have tried to urge. And I tried to give some flesh to it by, you know, we even drafted an urban governance bill, metropolitan urban governance, Bangalore governance bill, where all these reforms that have been thought of have been proposed, like a directly elected mayor, more powers to the political executive, one chief to oversee all the other sectors and all that. And it was even taken to the cabinet. Lakshmi knows about it. You know, they said, the chief minister said, take it to the cabinet, I am for it. Then they set up a cabinet subcommittee, and that was the end of it. Number of meetings, number of presentations were made. Sari Ravindra no, but the next meeting and all that. So I tried to tempt one of the ministers who's from Bangalore, saying that, sir, in Imadi, you can become the mayor of Bangalore, which will give you more powers than that of a minister, as it is in London and New York and all that, you know. In fact, I remember one of the former mayors or governors of US, he said, next to the president of the US, I would like to be mayor of New York.
Absolutely.
Next, that is the power of, and they have the power to transform. You know, the mayor of Curitiba, for instance, introduced the first public transport system and became a great innovation. Like that, you know, we can go on multiplying. That is one. Secondly, the integrative approach. You know, say now, when I refer to epistemology and all these things, it is this multi-sectoral discipline that urban study, urbanization is. It is multi-sectoral, multidisciplinary. So how do you bring about a kind of an integrative approach to this? That is another issue that I have addressed, and as I said, uh, we need proper governance structure for all this, political, administrative, etc. But essentially, it has to be a political decision ultimately. So the other issue that I have tried to address is the question of linkages between urban and rural. See, this is another very, very important that is ignored. We treat urban and rural as separate, in separate compartments, they're entirely different. The Rural Development Ministry, Urban Development Ministry, no, hardly anything. But in practice, we find an agglomeration that is expanding is nothing but a rural coming into the urban fold. And we are not really governing that part of it, and there's no this thing at all. So, just to briefly stated, what I have suggested is a kind of a rural-urban integrated development process. I use the words metropolis to rural-urban-polis, rural megapolis or whatever you can say like that. So that means number one, you take not only the city but the region into account. It's regional planning now. So that is, and I think there's a lot of other issues relating to economics, as I said, all that I have touched, economic inequality, inequities, political economy, all these issues also I have raised.
So just to pick up on the rural-urban question, the challenge for us, I would imagine, to shift the frame. In a sense, you know, if you go back to the National Commission on Urbanization, which is like, you know, now almost 40 years on or 35 years on, many of these ideas were sort of laid out there relatively clearly, and, you know, the downstream policy processes, etc., were laid out. But part of the challenge, I think, is the nature of the political process. Yeah. So effectively, cities are governed by people who are elected by and large by, you know, rural electorates, at least in their imagination. And cities historically have been places where you either get rents or you draw a whole range of, you know, resources from. But that's changing just now. I mean, you know, Karnataka is also becoming 50%. Gujarat has gone way beyond that just now, so is Tamil Nadu. So where do you see this shift coming from the political frame? Let's say, is it a change in generation of politicians? I mean, the younger political leaders inside parliament, for example, people that I talk to, they get many of the things you're talking about because they understand this shift of taking place in the demographics, the nature of the swing votes that are taking place in peri-urban areas are now very important for the politics. So how do you see this actually playing itself out in practice?
This is a very important point that you have raised. See, political representation of the urban has been low all along. But now it is speaking of with urbanization increasing, urban population increasing. But the snag is that, you know, the delimitation has to take place. It's still, we are following the old one. I think next is due in 2026 or so, I mean, something like that. We must see then, I think then we will know the real actual share of the urban and the rural. But there is no doubt that the younger politicians, even if they are come from rural area, see, they are settled in urban ultimately. So they all become urbanites. You know, that's what I referred to in my introduction also. The, you know, the importance of the urban. So, in fact, some of them are quite well educated, articulate. Now you find these people, you know. So I think they represent some hope, in my view. And it's a challenge for us how to convince them. Maybe, I mean, IIHS and some other institutions, some personalities. Now, we will have to take up this champ. See, the main problem with the urban, right from after independence, is that the urban development, urban has had no champion. Unlike the rural. See, rural development, Panchayati Raj, SKD was champion of Panchayati Raj here right to begin with after independence.
And Hegde and then
Ramkrishna Hegde, Abdul Nazir Saab,
exactly,
who was called Nir Saab. I think Srinivas Murthy knows. How, you see, there were some people pushing for rural development, and even now Panchayati Raj, the decentralization, the degree of decentralization is higher. Here they have not touched at all. That is the problem with the urban. So to convince them to bring about political reforms at the city level, all that we are talking about. A few political leaders, they may be MPs, MLAs, or even otherwise those who are in politics. How to get them together, and maybe we need to organize, I would say, some workshops or seminars, bring them together and throw up these ideas. And we must see how they react.
We've been trying to do that, and so have other institutions in the country to really, because I mean, even in the organization of political parties that are there, if you look at it,
Yeah.
you know, the transition from corporator to mayor, in any case, is not a very interesting thing for most cities, because the mayor's ceremonial office,
I know.
very short period of time. The commissioner is much more important than the mayor. But the translation from the mayor or the MLA to the MP also, they have no, and we've had this conversation. In fact, we ran two very large conversations, you know, with the ministry across the country to try and look at this question. Essentially, there is no interest at all for the members of parliament or the mayors to give, or the MLAs to give up the space that they have in the system to local political leaders, and there's hence no progression. I mean, in the current cabinet, how many people actually come from a urban power place? You know, and this
That's
is,
right. You see, the real problem is, I have seen in my own experience. For instance, even if you take in the city corporation, over councillors then, corporators, they used to argue vehemently for more powers to the city corporation. We don't have the Karaila, we should get more and all that. I have seen a couple of them become MLAs. And they never speak again about this. They want more, they want to exercise the power of the MLA. They result, they feel that we don't have sufficient power. Just lawmaking is not enough for us. We need power. They want to do that. Similarly, MLAs or ministers at state level, when they become MPs, they also don't argue for, again, center state. Today there's a big discussion about center state relations and the conflicts and all that. So this is what I can even name people. For instance, I think one name I'll mention. See, Mr. Somanna, who's become a minister at the central level, he was a corporator when I was the commissioner long back. And then he became MLA, then of course I was in the government and all that. I knew him. So he has now gone there, but I don't know whether he will champion the cause of the city corporation or the city governance. This is the problem. That's again, so that is another challenge. Probably it is a good idea to bring them, those who were at the corporation or state level, and a few of them.
you have to demonstrate, in a sense, a line of success.
Yeah.
Because like you were saying, the mayor of New York, I mean, I worked with 2 mayors in New York, and more than that, the mayor of Shanghai. See, in China, 6 big cities, they are Politburo members.
Absolutely.
As far as China is concerned. Vijay, we want to jump in and say something?
I just want to, in your formula of funds, function, and functionaries, I think your governance knot will be cut only by transferring funds straight to the third tier. Once state government start out that money, then they will start listening to this. So maybe we want to cut this, the fund transfer to the by sharing taxes to the third tier will ensure that the funds and functionaries and functionaries shift to the third tier. So, what is the expression, deus ex machina?
Yes. Yeah.
So that will be that's the only way I can see it, because otherwise I don't see, there's no demand for otherwise. There's no agitation in Pune at least on bad roads and bad. I don't see there is effective political voice, a demand in at least Maharashtra. Maybe it's different here. So one way of doing it, there's a great book of Albert Heichmann, Exit, Voice and Loyalty. So we have to find another way of, just give money. And you'll find that will starve the central government, starve the state governments of money. Then you'll find slowly pressure coming up. Because otherwise there's no demand. At least Maharashtra, I don't see no demand coming to improve social service, public services.
I mean, just to pick up on that, and maybe Dr. Ravindra will have a comment on this. This was an attempt that we tried to do last year, because one of the suggestions that was made for this, it was the ministry was running this together, was amend the 74th Amendment, give it teeth by making it mandatory, not saying should, but shall. Simple.
Not may, but
May, but shall. More important to actually effect rule-based transfers. So even if the state finance commissions are somewhat tardy, the resource flow actually happens to the local level. So there's a little bit of tricky there because state finance commission are complex beings in some senses. The question is, it got unstuck in Delhi around the question of GST because they felt this would mean reworking the GST arrangement and of course taking it through GST Council, which is a complicated thing. So I'm just, between the two of you, where would you think this can actually, is it the fate of the Prime Minister that makes this thing happen? Does the Finance Minister lead it? How can one enable this to be, if the theory of change is correct, make sure that there's rule-based transfers, you get 2 or 3% going to local bodies, that will create resources will bring in people, will attract political power, and there will be contest. So what is the way forward as far as that's concerned? Because both of you have... Mike's up. Sorry.
Money is what they call milk or honey for the politicians. I mean, if money is there, we'll find whole thing will change.
Do you agree with that, sir? That if the finances flow, things will actually move?
You see, if you look at how 73rd, 74th amendments were passed, it was supposed to be championed by Rajiv Gandhi.
It failed in its original thing. 59, 61st amendment.
Yeah, it failed.
Yes, it failed by one vote.
Passed during Narasimha Rao's time.
Exactly. Yeah.
See, that whatever the reason. And initially it was only 73rd. 74th came up later because of this one and so it needs to be championed at the highest level. Now that it needs a constitutional amendment. It has to get the attention of the Prime Minister, no doubt about it. But how it should reach the PM through the PMO or somebody else. So again, the Urban Development Minister, now it is somebody else. So we will have to look at that, and otherwise it's very difficult. But to operationalize some things, for instance, it's not merely the municipal. See, if you look at the urban planning aspect, the amendment provides for a metropolitan planning committee for big cities and district planning committee. See, one very important provision which people ignore is the sharing of natural resources between the urban and the rural. It's a very, so that's why you find representation of the panchayats also in the
MPCs.
In that committee, Metropolitan Planning Committee. It's not only the BBMP and some municipal councils, but in the entire region, the panchayat chairmen are also members in that proportion, whatever. So even that is not, and it is much better in the districts. See, district planning committee can really make this urban-rural work. If at all, there again nobody bothers. The Zilla Panchayat chairman is the chairman. I think they don't even hold meetings. So that's why I've said practice. Policy is one. How do you really reconcile or try to address this problem?
So some states have been trying to do this. For example, over the last 10 years or so, Odisha has taken some very, I would say, contrarian kind of views of this process, both on tenure, that's one issue, but also on trying to sort of devolve and in fact almost build a municipal cadre. They haven't finally got that far, and other states are considering to do that. So we're talking about funds, functions, and functionary is fine. So some states are trying to do that. Do you think there's still space for states that are, and Odisha is not like a tremendously urbanized state. I can understand if Tamil Nadu does that, or Maharashtra. Gujarat also doesn't work. Gujarat uses a slightly more corporate model of management. So you think there's space for that to actually happen, that you can use building institutional capacity, building entire structure that is aligned to the urban?
Yeah, that is one, but as I was saying, it is political capacity in that sense. There again, the states are divided in the sense, see, their own structures are very different. For instance, if you take Tamil Nadu, there is no decentralization at all there. They still rely on officials, district collector, he is the chairman and all that, Similarly, Andhra follows somewhat similar because it was part of the same.
Part of the same, yeah.
Maybe Karnataka is more of Panchayati Raj. Kerala is the best example, model of decentralization. But that is difficult to replicate. Maharashtra, Gujarat and all. But there again, they come together. For instance, the southern states now seeming to be coming together to address some, regional issues. So, like that, this also becomes a subject for the, let us say, Southern Zonal Council meeting, Northern Council meeting. From there, we need to build the political acceptability of this concept. But otherwise, merely institution building capacity, yeah, we need to increase the capacity, no doubt, governing, you are doing your best, and similarly, some other institutions that may improve governance to some extent, administration and all. But final accountability, as I said, see, you need political accountability. Only then you can fix administrative accountability. Today, whatever is happening across, there's no accountability at the city level at all. At least at the state, central level, somebody is recognized as the leader, something goes wrong, they say, minister may resign, CM must resign, PM must, because he's identified. See, in the city, they can't say mayor resign because nothing will happen, makes no difference. Commissioner cannot resign because he's a government official. So, this is the conundrum, that's why I call it the conundrum of urban governance. And of course, whatever suggestions I have made, certainly subject for further discussion. Maybe we need to organize some workshops.
So one of the things that you lay out in the book is the importance of infrastructure, including IT. Huh?
Yeah.
I mean, to actually sort of accelerate some of these changes and make this thing actually happen. And you're seeing at least a movement in that space. So for example, first day of the first cabinet meeting at the national level, we announced a massive program as far as housing is concerned. Huh? Maybe not on the infrastructure side. So, and infrastructure also has the opportunity to connect the urban with the rural. You've seen that with roads, with the whole range of other things as far as.
Certainly, infrastructure has a big role. So even if it comes in the form of programs and schemes from at the national level or at the state level, that has been happening in a sense, For instance, in Karnataka, they had chief ministers, urban development scheme, and other towns, not Bangalore. They gave 100 crores to each of the city. And that resulted in some infrastructure improvement. I have myself seen that has happened. So similarly, especially, as I said, I have identified 4 critical issues, as you know. Water supply, housing, and land. Land and housing go together. That is the key problem. And mobility, as I've said, urban transport, and environment and climate change, of which you know. So if these need to be addressed at different stages, and so infrastructure development will certainly improve the city, the quality of living to some extent. But accountability is still your question mark. That is the thing.
And much of our infrastructure development, like you said earlier, is led by often parastatal institutions, and in some cases, depending on what the infrastructure is, by the private sector. So, telecom is led completely by the private sector. Airports now is increasingly being led by that. So, if you're talking about trying to not only increase the quality of basic services and overall service quality in urban areas, but also between urban and rural areas, as they get more connected, what is the frame of our thinking about the public, the private, and the intermediate kind of places inside this? How would you see that playing itself out?
I think that's why, I said that integrated approach, where, I don't know whether I've used that term, collaborative governance. So you need to involve the government or public sector, private sector, and even civil society. So state, market, and society, all these 3 need to be addressed. One bright spot I see is the use of technology. That also I have addressed in some detail. And a lot of governance improvements have taken place because of, even for instance, Bhumi in Karnataka. And and lot of services, issue of Kata certificates, etc. All that has been, the technology has been of great help. But the internal governance, because even if they are assured in the sense on paper, we can get, for instance, a Kata, they say, but in practice we find it doesn't happen. It gets delayed and delayed and delayed, which again brings me back to the question of human element. Ultimately, you have to address the human element. One is, of course, lack of capacity, like shortage of manpower, trained manpower, especially not trained in modern, all the technology and other, even planning itself. I see every city, at the totally there are some more than 1,000 or 2,000. Shortage of town planners, for instance. Shortage of, for instance, say, to manage a city, transportation, for instance. You need transportation engineers, traffic engineers. We don't have them in our. See, this is the problem. So that part, so technology, especially now, I think with AI, I think it has become all the more. I don't know. I mean, the future is a little uncertain about AI, especially about AGI. I think artificial general intelligence. Somebody, somewhere I was reading 2 years back, saying that with AGI, even the city management can be addressed. For instance, your transport can improve, your waste management can improve drastically. And surveillance, this is the problem is surveillance is good and bad. Of course, AI, particularly the good and bad, one has to keep in mind. That's why I also brought out that aspect. And the city, I mean, it is subject to terror attacks and so on. I mean, all those issues also come in. Safety, for instance. See, that is often ignored. We don't address safety questions at all. It's right from walking on the road or the footpath, right up to, the crimes and terror attacks and all, safety of women and nights. So these are again issues. That's why I had one small section on matters of daily importance, like all this safety, security, and manual scavenging. I mean, it's a shame that a city should have, there should still be manual scavengers, etc. So these inequalities and those issues also come in. But technology, I think, will be a great integrating force. As you said, even link between, see, now technology has reached the villages. So with the mobile, connectivity is there, transactions in financial transactions, payments, and all these things, there. And even smaller cities, quote a secondary cities and all. Now there is demand. You see, even there are more jobs, IT jobs, more incomes have gone up. It's towns like, say, Bhubaneswar and all that, smaller cities. So I think how to address that, we have often forget the importance of secondary cities and other cities, So that also needs to be
Absolutely, in terms of employment especially, because what we saw during and after COVID, in some senses is a sharp reminder of both inequality and also the structural challenges in the urban economy at the moment.
Yeah.
So any reflections on that and how, job creation is a central question, right?
Yeah.
You're not able to create
See,
jobs.
now in fact, I have started my book with COVID. If you see that in introduction, I said COVID started in a city in China.
Yeah.
So the implications of that, how it got transferred, and the entire city, all cities came to a halt. Here also, because when they declared that
Shutdown.
lockdown. Shutdown.
One question, your last chapter is how to improve governance. I was reading that, it occurred to me, why private sector are interested in this question? Why Indian private sector, which played role in getting Indian independence, Indian private sector people are very important in Indian capitalism. Why don't the private sector is not interested in improving urban governance?
In some places they have. In fact, Bangalore is that classic example. The BATF was a private sector initiative which eventually led to JNURM. But I think, I don't know.
Why not sustain base? That's the issue which really came to my mind, because as I said, how do they improve the demand for good governance? Why not private sector demanding it?
See,
they have resources, they have access to powers as big. They can mobilize in the, I see our friend Anil is here, Anil Gokak. We remember Vijay Deshmukh? Vijay Deshmukh, after retirement, they settled in Pune. And he started NGO called Janavani. There are a lot of private sector did participate with him for improving things in Pune. I mean, so he was a catalytic agent. I mean, he understood the issues of urbanization, he understood his experience. So why can't private sector take more interest in the changing cities? They're interested, they should be interested.
See, I think the point about the demand for good governance. Right. See, private sector has been orally demanding. So financially, they don't put in the money. For instance, whenever
They're financing all the time the political parties. I mean, if they really want it, they can do it. I refuse to believe that they can't increase the finances. I don't know, I don't have an answer, but really question to my mind, why private sector is not demanding better governance of our cities.
yeah,
My submission here is that a lot of the private sector is happy to secede from public services. And it's easy. We have the technologies to do it just now. In the power sector, captive power, captive water. So if you can internalize the cost, it's not making much difference to you. Then all that matters is how you can go from where you're working and where you stay to the airport. I mean, unfortunately, that's what, international capital has done to many of our cities. And our infrastructures are also designed around that kind of thing. That's one hypothesis. I'm sure Dr. Ravindra may have other...
They clamor for good governance, they clamor for infrastructure. Just to give you an example, take Electronic City, for instance, which came up.
Yes.
Then it was very far, considered far from Bangalore. The road and all was very awful. So I remember the big IT on-show in the electronic. They stood on the road and there was an agitation, including Ms. Narayan Murthy. They were on the road saying that you have to improve the road and all. So that way, they may demand better infrastructure, better this, better that. So the issue was also raised that you should also contribute something financial. They said, no, we are paying income tax. And you see, cities are generating so much wealth, we pay other kinds of taxes, etc. So it is the function of the state government to improve investment and all they should do. But the demand can come from, so that is the, but technicalism, for instance, BATF, Jairaj was there, Bangalore Agenda Task Force was created. But that again was the initiative of the state. They constituted the task force with some private sector. They said some technical assistance and advice and that they might have given. It's more trying to, bring some coordination between agencies. I think.
I don't know, we probably require a new political party, just who will focus on urban issues and demand. I thought AAP was like that. When AAP emerged, AAP was one political party which came in Delhi, it was essentially urbanite. So I was really looking at the development up, whether it can be replicated, happen in other cities or not. Because their demand is only for what, quite rightly, the public goods in urban areas, like Mohalla clinic, Mohalla, all started with the whole issue of. So maybe that may be the solution, that we make it the sprouting of this kind of movements, where people will organize themselves and just demand better services.
No, that way, civil society in some place, even in Bangalore is fairly strong. I mean, there are good associations, they do demand, even, for instance, I would say 74 ward committees.
Yes.
Even the formation of ward committees, setting them up, making them function is greatly the role of civil society. I mean, they have
played a very important role
to
here.
achieve it. At least a few of them do well, are doing well.
I think new delimitation also will increase the power of the urban societies, Of course, that will again postpone, unfortunately.
Yeah. See, ultimately, it's a question of transfer of power, and there is the reluctance of the higher level leaders to part with power so far as urban areas are concerned, because as I argued in political economy, the wealth in urban areas, particularly cities like Bombay, Bangalore, is so great that no minister, chief minister would like to let go of it. See, so that mindset has to change. Somebody has to be attuned to, no wealth for me, but.
So last question before I think we open up to the audience here. One of the core elements of where that wealth is concentrated is in land markets. And land markets are a complicated story. Because at one end, revenue department controls land in rural areas and you want that transition, that's it. Most political parties are funded by the transition from urban to rural land and other such things that are there. And then of course, metropolitan development has lots of interesting interests, including large corporations that are coming in. Dharavi is now being redeveloped by very large corporations. There's big interests that are there. How do you see the reworking of, because if you're looking about any kind of functionality in urban areas, without dealing with land, we're not going to get anywhere. So Karnataka has made some advances. Other states, even like UP, have made advances on property, digitization, etc. How does one deal with this question of land and the stickiness of land markets not working in favor? Forget about the poor and the vulnerable. Even for public infrastructure, it's now almost impossible for us to be able to manage and plan and deal with stuff.
See, land market, I would say, is the urban land market, one of the most complex issues to deal with. See, you take, for instance, expansion of any city, the development authorities, the DDR, BDA here, Bangalore. So now they acquire land in the first place to form a layout. See, long back we had even taken a decision that they should not go on acquiring land and form layouts and give individual sites. I strongly argued, and once I remember a decision was also taken. But now recently I find they want to acquire another 2,000 acres. I wrote an article on it also. It's absolutely stupid. I mean, first of all, land is so expensive. See, here, that's where political economy comes in. Because they want, the political leaders, they are interested in land, acquiring land for the agriculture. They also protest, but they say, okay, we will give you land in this return, etc., etc. So that, and see, not merely land, they also have other kinds of privileges now. They themselves are owners of medical colleges, engineering colleges, etc. And so they acquire huge pieces of land in the outskirts, Dayanand Sagar College, in a big way. I mean, all of them. Maybe in one way it is good because we get educational institutions. That can be argued. But if you look at it from the city urban development point of view, see, this is what is happening. It is leaders are interested in land themselves. So, can there be some law? That's the only way. I mean, whether state is difficult, central, which will restrict this kind of land, and land acquisition itself is a big problem, as I brought out extensively on the land acquisition issue.
Yes.
So, land acquisition, land market, and you see the entire process of land titles. I think biggest problem is land titles. Slum dwellers continue to be there because they can't get land titles. So how do you have to resolve all these issues in a very holistic fashion? And you need strong governance, I would say.
I mean, land is the trickiest question because, I mean, so the land acquisition, as you say very clearly here, has been made very complex just now because of the land, LARR, etc. So then people have gone into using land pooling. In fact, Mr. Naidu came to grief in Andhra Pradesh around this question, around Amravati. Of course, now he's coming back and he'll try and do the same thing. So unless one addresses these questions structurally, it's going to be a huge, huge issue. So Odisha, bit the bullet, at least in the last government. The government is now changed and has done tremendous amounts of things. Of course, small population, but in terms of titling. So it's possible to do that. Earlier, Madhya Pradesh had tried that many years ago. Especially when you have public lands that are available, Karnataka could well do the same thing here. Because they have public lands that are available.
It's possible to do it because I think government or the public bodies like BDA, they should take care of only the weaker sections. Housing. Because housing in the private sector is so many flats are vacant, as you know.
Yes.
So they are able to find even middle classes. For that section, you provide, not acquire extensive land, but provide proper housing and the required infrastructure facilities, etc. The other things, regulating the land market, regulate whether you need a regulator. See, that is another question. For instance, we have RERA, which is again, this is the problem. You create institution, the way it functions is again disappointing. So that's where you get institutional capacity or the right type of persons to manage the institutions, particularly regulatory institutions, not merely land, but even the other sectors. I think that is the biggest question, I would say, regulating the land market in particular, and more process.
There are lots of people here who have tremendous amount of experience and lots of questions. So, very happy to open it up for maybe 5-10 minutes or so. Yeah.
We have a question online, so we could start
Sure,
with that,
please.
perhaps.
Yeah.
We have Mr. Prakhar, who's written, is the distinction between urban and rural still relevant, that we need different structures of governmental institutions to manage them separately? Does it not cause multiple institutions performing the same function? I guess it's open to anyone who'd like to answer.
Multiple institutions, that is.
When you think urban and rural, should you have two separate structures? In the 21st century, do you need both? This is a history of public administration.
Yeah, I think you see where you need both. I mean, entirely there is a certain purely rural area. It is the geography that counts. But one institution, let us say, to manage the city and the periphery. Peripheral urban governance is another neglected area. So now there is multiple, in the sense, there's a municipal council, a panchayat comes in, and you don't know. Sometimes you don't know. A person doesn't know whom to apply and get his permission for his own constructing a building. So that you need one for the agglomeration, and that is one. And for the rural separately. But these linkages you have to keep on keeping a watch, because that will keep on more. See, ultimately we also have to address the question of migration. So I have addressed that question also. Somebody said that is the most important. Migration from rural to, not only rural to urban to urban, because smaller towns, if you look at here also in Karnataka, more migration from urban to urban. Even from a small town, let us say from Nanjangud, somebody will come here, like that, that. So this whole process of migration, rural-urban migration, has to be addressed, and we need to create appropriate structures for the governance structure.
Sorry, sir, you want to introduce yourself first?
I am Ganesh Prasad, advocate. See, my question is related to land, which I am interested for 20-25 years. I have been raising these issues. The main issue is in India, this constitutionally also land is not properly defined. These politicians, celebrities, and land sharks together, they get free money. So they buy all the huge stretch of land. After some time, they farm the layout. And now there is one more threat. That is, 6,000 square feet, 9,000 square feet farmland is created, which is totally useless. Then what they do? They go to now. See, either to Madhur and all 30 lakhs, 25 lakhs per acre, it is going up to 1 crore. So I think, in the constitution first, property has to be defined, and then property citizen has to be. See, how much a citizen has to own it. So even if he has black money, additional funds, he cannot own land beyond a certain proportion. All these things will have to be done. Unless and until it is done, there is no point in talking about governing India. It will never be governed properly.
Yeah, I think you can.
The right to property is an old settled constitutional question in some senses, but anyway, can we get one more? Yeah, Mike's. Yeah, you have to. Yeah, please.
I think the basic question we need to. I'm Srinivas Murthy, retired civil servant. Basic question that is plaguing local governance, whether it is rural or urban, is the kind of constitutional amendment we have. The 12th schedule powers listed, they are all state government's powers. It is just notionally they have separately listed them in the 12th schedule of the Constitution. Because of the overlapping jurisdiction and overriding jurisdiction of the state government, local governments just don't have the autonomy. So you need to really someday address that particular question, amend Article 243 and see that the local governments have real autonomy and not have state governments overlapping jurisdiction over their functions. because their jurisdiction is superior to ours. Now, secondly, about demand generation, there is plenty of demand. Sir, in economics, demand is always backed by your purchasing power. Here, if people demand some services, they're not putting forward their purchasing power. They just vocally demand something. So, if a local government has to ask for a certain quantum of funds, then the demand has to be backed by a certain amount of payment. If a residents' welfare association or a ward committee, let's say, has the power of collecting taxes and says, no, I have collected 1 crore, I am entitled to 5 crores from government as grant, as matching according to a formula. So that is when the demand will be really effective. Today, if you simply stand up and say, I want this or that, it's not going to come. You have been in the 13th Finance Commission, sir. Before you, I had the pleasure of presenting the state's memorandum. Now, central pool of shareable taxes, it just gets distributed to different states. There is some logic sometimes, but states cannot say, I have contributed this much, you give me this much back. No, that principle is not accepted. We had the principle of contribution in the earlier finance commissions. Now that's completely done away with. Now, whoever is the poorest state, supposedly, will get the maximum per capita grant without having to really make any effort to deserve that. That is the first and foremost question we need to address. Then about the demand for various things, land. There's plenty of demand for sites in Bangalore. The Bangalore Development Authority, sorry Lakshmi, Bangalore Development Authority, for a number of reasons, because they were bound by law and judgments of the courts and various things, they just could not meet the growing demand. And as a result, private builders took over. And the land laws of Karnataka and all over the country, they are antiquated. They date back to, see, even Mughal era, probably. See, therefore, if there is a theory that this is agricultural land, because I say so, this cannot be used as industrial land. Cannot be used for urban purposes. These are all fictions. You don't have a proper regulation to say that I do this zoning and this zone I permit because I provide public infrastructure for this. So there is a serious effort required to reform the laws that govern urban properties. That's when we will have, and there is serious effort required to empower the local communities and demand financial contribution from them so that they can demand higher share of finances from the higher authorities. So these are some of the basic issues, and I'm sure these would have been touched upon in the book, and would be very happy to go through that. Thank you for this opportunity, sir.
Yeah, I have addressed this issue of local autonomy. I think Dr. Kelkar also has addressed it in his forward. So both of us have dealt with at length on. I'll come.
Yes, there's a whole section here.
Local strengthen local governments. That means more autonomy, financial autonomy, as well as political administrative autonomy. That is one. Secondly, on the question of our friend raised a question about land or limiting property and all that. That is constitutionally not possible. But then I can tell you, we have already had one experience about limiting the ownership of property in urban area. There was what was called an Urban Land Stealing Act.
Yeah.
I don't know how many of you remember that.
Ultra.
But that was a very sincere attempt at urban land reform. But it has completely backfired. In fact, I had the unique experience of trying to implement that act in Karnataka, here. As soon as that act came, I was put in charge. I was a deputy secretary, still in the 70s, to attend only to that. And so I mastered that act. But I will not go into the details. I've explained all that, including my experience. So you can't limit, that's very complicated. One may like to, even rural land reforms itself was a big problem. So anyway, that's a separate, this is separate. So this, all these, we have addressed in some way, as you said, strengthening. But we must also remember, while talking about a lot about local autonomy and all that, today managing a city or governing a city is much more than municipal governance or, it's a whole lot of economic, social, environmental issues. So relationships with state government and central government are also very important. Big megalopolis like Bangalore, Bombay, it needs central assistance also. Actually, it is global actually. The linkages today, Bangalore is called IT capital, known all over the world. So foreign investor comes, he has to get his clearance from the center, state, but that is another issue, how to do that. In China, as you said, the local mayor is empowered to even sign agreements with foreign countries, give them land, invest everything. So these are issues in which we also referred to, but they need to be addressed.
Good. Is there any last question from somebody? Go ahead.
Sir, my name is Ganesh, and I'm a recently graduated law graduate. So my question concerns my generation and the generational divide that's emerging in urban areas. So what I have noticed is that with the increase in life expectancy, which is all really good, is that people are living longer. So the older generation, let's say in the America, the baby boomers have the highest, concentration in land holding. So what that has left is the younger generation are basically spending most of their income on, renting property because they can't own anything. And almost all of their time is spent in, paying for a mortgage or, balancing interest rates. So my question is, how do we address this generational gap before it, it has already emerged in cities like Bangalore, but how do we, let's say, stop this from emerging in, other cities in India or, exacerbating?
I think Lakshmi wants to say something.
Yeah, we'll just get your mic, Lakshmi.
I think the recurring theme in today's discussion is that we have an institutional structure, particularly at the third tier, which is becoming, I would say across the board really, but the state and this third tier, which has really become a major impediment to kind of reimagining the way India is governed and to achieve some of our socio-economic objectives. Yeah. So I am really a votary for changing everything, and I think this is a very good time to really sort of put the spotlight on this because there's a long pending census which is overdue, and basis the census we have to do the delimitation exercise. And this is where, I haven't read your book because it's just released today, but really, do we need a third tier where we have this distinction between rural and urban in the first place? And why can't we reimagine states as a cluster of city governments, and basically city governments which would have their urban responsibilities and also administer the rural hinterlands that come within the metropolis of that particular city? How you do this division, it's a mammoth task, but I don't think the way forward is to kind of do more of the same with a few bits of tweaking here and there.
Yeah, that's right. I have also addressed this question of rural or...
Yeah, please, 1 second.
Anybody?
Yeah,
Jairaj, yes.
Yeah, Jairaj's closing comments.
So the issues that have been brought out today are nothing new.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, I remember in 99, 2000, when I became BMP commissioner for the first time and Mr. Krishna constituted the BATF, the same set of issues have been argued since then. And it's a tragedy, sir, that we are not able to resolve these issues, and we have no shortage of ideas on how to make things better. So my suggestion to you, Aromar, is, you should have a separate discussion on how to manage the city. Because to me, that is the core of governance. And there are practical matters that sir and others can contribute to, which you can put together and do a signal service for improving management.
That's what
my
we teach
suggestion
about.
to you.
That's what we train our
Thank
folks
you.
to do it. Yeah, thank you so much.
Just
Jared.
last comment and all. See, what you say is right. The problems or the issues are old, but the solutions can be new. See, this is the, once I remember, Albert Einstein, the famous scientist, he was, and it was an examination, he was in that examination hall supervising. A student got up and said, "Sir, the questions are more or less the same as of last year. Last year, whatever questions were given, this year also." He said, "Questions are the same, but the answers will be different." So you have to think anew, because earlier solutions or answers have not worked. So we have to think anew and see what can be done. As you are saying, how to convince the political leadership, or building capacity, or how much of, see, even when you speak about autonomy, I have raised the question, how much of autonomy to the state government? So, or the concept of, should you have a city government, which means which will take away much of the power of the state government. So that is the question. So these are issues, and even as I said, the property things I've answered. What Srinivas Murthy and all. I've tried to address some of them, not that I've given all answers. As I said, it is some questions have been raised, issues have been addressed. And we need to further explore, because I don't think there can be final answers to many things. But as we go, we evolve. As urbanization has evolved, and it will keep it. We are not at 50% of the population urban. It is still not even 40%. So it will keep evolving, and we have goals for 2030, 2050, and so on. So we need to set goals in this direction also. What can we achieve first by 2030? That can be.
Accepting the changes are now going to become very, very much faster, because we are on an exponential trend just now. So you'll go from 33% to 50% in under 20 years. And that's a big shift, 300 million people. So that is the big thing that's there. Along with the technology and the possibility of getting something like COVID, plus economic contagion, plus
Public health issues will be very critical in future. In the cities, I have addressed that in great detail.
Good.
And capacity for dealing with public health, COVID type of diseases, zoonotics, human-animal conflict. These are all very, very serious issues. Environment, climate change. He is an expert. You don't know. A lot of uncertainties are there about the future. That also have to be taken. How to meet uncertainties to the extent possible, the best.
Exactly. So thank you so much. It's been we've run over a little bit of time, but I think thanks for the participation and the questions. And again, congratulations, Dr. Ravindra, on the book.